Hi, I'm Pearl Peng, an Executive Partner and Chief Innovation Officer at Evoloshen, an international corporate training and consulting company based in Stockholm, Sweden, that is transforming organizations successfully through culture across the globe. I'm the founder of my own consulting firm. I'm an executive advisor, strategist, speaker, and certified conversational intelligence coach with over 3 decades of experience working with top companies worldwide, out of which 18 years was with IBM. I'm live with you from sunny Tampa Bay area in Florida and joined by my colleague and co-host, Ms. Sayre Darling. Sayre, introduce yourself.
Excellent. Thank you, Pearl. Hello, everyone. It's good to see all of you. I also am an executive partner with Evoloshen, and I help leverage change to accelerate business and careers. So anyone dealing with change, I work with them to not resist it, not to manage it, but how to leapfrog your business because of change. So it's nice to see everyone here, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Sayre. Welcome to New Ways of Working, a 3-part webinar series that was started on May 18th, where we reimagine a new organizational culture due to the impact of 2020. And today, on June 4th, we'll be focusing on redefining the employer-employee relationship and engagement. And in 2 weeks, on June 18th, we'll turn to the topic of designing the culture building process with our guest speaker, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐨𝐬𝐹 of Jameson Consulting. In our first program, we discussed the tremendous impact of 2020. This unprecedented year has changed many organizations across the globe. Employees' expectations have changed, and employers' expectations have also changed. We've seen companies with strong and healthy cultures fare well and even be able to pivot quickly to thrive than those that don't have strong cultures. Organizations large and small are faced at this critical juncture to build a new culture that provides an equitable experience for everyone. The new culture needs to be redefined clearly to align with business goals in 2021 and beyond. Further, we have established that trust is at the core of building a strong culture. As Stephen M. R. Covey called out in his best-selling book, Speed of Trust, we can increase trust much faster than we might think, and doing so will have a huge impact, both in the quality of our lives and in the results we are able to achieve. Yet the sobering reality is that you can have all the facts and figures, all the supporting evidence, all the endorsement that you want, but if you don't command trust, you won't get anywhere. We then cover the 8 pillars of culture, starting with the top 3 pillars: purpose, values, and behaviors. We ended with the 2 foundational pillars, relationships and conversations. A trust arc, one of the many conversational intelligence tools, was also presented as a catalyst to facilitate trust building practice. Finally, we presented 26 tips of new ways to build culture in 5 categories. They are captured in a PDF document that is a free bonus gift from us, and you should have received this gift after you registered and attended the first program, along with the link to the recording. If you have any questions regarding access to the document or recording link, feel free to reach out to support@evoloshen.com for help. So all of the points discussed in Program 1 forms the foundation of today's discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Pearl. So today we're going to jump in and see how 2020 has changed the relationship between employers and employees. And as we've already discussed, we have been changed by 2020. There has been no other event in our working days or generations previous where we have had an event in life that has shut down business for so long, save for our recovery after 9/11, when business was disrupted for a few days. For the most part, everything continued to move along just fine. And so business has been shut down. The veil between what's going on in real life and business has evaporated. We got to see each other, employers and employees. We got to see each other working in our pajamas, with children running across the screen, cats crawling up in front of our cameras. The line of authority between employer and employee has changed dramatically. It's humanized us in many ways, but now we have to continue working from home, as many folks will, but we have to come back into the workplace as well and return to something that we feel is going to be our new normal, and that will be different than returning to pre-COVID behaviors. Also need to remember that everyone is in transition. You know, just because the event of 2020 is over does not mean we have integrated all of the changes in our life, or even our own interpersonal conversation about what changed for me last year. How am I a different person? And because of the way business is coming back at full tilt as fast as possible, there will also be continued transformations, additional transitions in the workplace at a rate we haven't seen before. There are so many more people looking for jobs right now because they just want to change. After the intense experience that we had in 2020, people just want something new. That will continue then to create stress, discomfort, distrust, and uncertainty for people, and employers and employees need to understand that that's very normal. At the same time, we're giving each other less latitude, and we're all judging each other very quickly about how we're behaving and how we're communicating, when in fact we are in less control of how we're behaving and how we're feeling on any given day, just given the stress and uncertainty we've been under for so long. And unfortunately, there's also greater consequences for our actions and inactions. You know, when we are cutting people less latitude, judging them and making these snap decisions about, well, they don't like me anymore, or there's a reorganization, or my job is being threatened, or whatever the story is you're telling yourself, we can sorely stand the chance to lose one more person inside of our organizations. We do not have the buffer that we have had in the past. Everyone is being asked to increase their productivity, work even faster. And so when you have to take time to replace someone, and heaven forbid, you need to recruit people in fields where it's very difficult to find talent right now, it can be a significant disruption to your business. And then finally, culture must appeal to a broader set of motivations. People are talking about coming through COVID and having different values. Other things are important to them that weren't important to them before. And having a sense of a need to fulfill a higher purpose. So the culture must appeal to a broader sense of motivations. So now, how does that really play out in the workplace? So to rebuild, COVID, we need to recognize, had an uneven impact. You know, some businesses really took off and reinvented themselves, and they're thriving. They're a brand new company already. Other people are still kind of wandering around in limbo, and some organizations who previous to COVID had a toxic environment are really having a rough time right now. So we have to remember that whatever your organization, you're going to be coming back differently than everyone else. And I'm not going to fully understand the impact of all that changed last year until we get further into this year and go, oh, You know, third quarter last year, we were doing this. How did we do it prior to COVID? Wow, I didn't realize that we had changed so much. There's going to be a lot of that coming up in the future. So with that being the case, we want to suggest that companies avoid further disruptive changes in the way they are working. It's important to maintain some consistency, hold the ship steady, over communicate, reassure people a great deal that we are moving forward. Don't let this particular communications frighten you or shake you in any way. Also, we need to shift from our command and control type of management style to conversation and collaboration. And here's why I say that. Last year, when the veil was removed, everyone was humanized. Leaders were asked to be authentic, transparent, and have compassionate directness. Now, when we're going back into the office and returning to a little bit more of normal business practices, there's going to be a lot of pent-up energy. And when there's a lot of pent-up energy and folks are back in the workplace, we're going to forget, oh yes, authenticity, transparency, and compassionate directness, and go straight back to our old habits of command and control, when in fact, that is not going to be as effective as continuing with more conversation and collaboration. And where do you start in making that your go-to way of building relationships? Well, we have to remember that business is a conversation. Every single business started with a conversation, and that's where you start when it's time to rebuild your relationships between employers and employees, and then work towards building a new culture. I want to call out the difference between conversation and communication, in that conversation really includes the whole person. You understand the story behind their response. You have multiple topics, some about your personal life, some about what's going on in the world. They're more random, and they're a lot more, they bring a lot more emotion to the table. Whereas the communication of, here's my question on this issue, what's your answer? Well, here's my response. So I'm talking about using conversation to really build those new connections with the whole person that you are working with. Whether you are an employee initiating conversations with leadership, which is just as important as leaders initiating those conversations with the employees. So what do you do after you have started those conversations? Well, first of all, you have to remember that we're in a state of total stress and distrust at the moment. And so it takes more than one conversation to rebuild that. So my suggestion is that you go slow to move fast. Once you have a number of conversations, then you can pick up the pace a bit. But there's no need to rush this new engagement, this new conversation development. Just hold things steady, continue to have conversations. As I shared in the last slide, make sure conversations go both ways. Employees are much more accustomed to leaders initiating the conversations, setting the tone, setting the direction. And when it comes to rebuilding relationships, everyone needs to be involved. Employees need to feel free to talk to leaders beyond their chain of command, get to know other people in the organization. Likewise, leaders can do the same. The difference is leaders need to make it clear that it is safe to do that. The other thing we want to suggest here is to make time for regular conversation and connection. So now that we're many of us will be back in the office for a few days, a week at least. Make time for conversation when you are back in the office. Put it on your calendar, walk around the office, hold conversations, engage people. I realize how difficult that can be when everyone is working full tilt right now and stressed out about how much more they can increase their productivity. But because we're going to be working in this hybrid environment of working at home quite often and then working in the office, we need to make use of the FaceTime when we have it, and really find different ways to connect when we have people, when we're around other people. The other thing to consider is to do a lot of follow through and feedback. So you're in a conversation and someone wants a recommendation to daycare or a different school or a different grocery store. One sure way to differentiate yourself and how you are building trust and really wanting to reconnect and build those new engagements is to follow through and give feedback. So easy to forget to do that these days, but if you really want to stand out and make it perfectly clear you're serious about building new engagements and new ways of connecting employers and employers, make sure that you use follow through and feedback. And then I know that last year we had a lot of technology integrated into the way we do business. But don't let technology replace face-to-face communication. You know, there's so much technology used in reaching customers these days, but also think about how many apps there are just in internal communications alone. And it would be very easy to say, oh, yeah, we moved all that online. Well, then you're missing the entire point of connecting and building connections and culture if you don't take advantage of some face-to-face communications.
Great point, Sayre. Next, let's look at the science behind effective and meaningful conversations at a macro level. When we interact with each other, our brains create neurochemicals that tell us whether we're friends or foes, safe or in danger, and what we should say or do next. You may have heard words create worlds, and meaning resides in the listener's mind, as well as we judge ourselves by our intentions and others by their behavior. Conversational intelligence, or CIQ in short, is really built in each one of us. It's about we can elevate each other through conversations by shifting from fearful words that trigger negative emotions to words that inspire and build healthy organizational environments. So in other words, shifting from I-centric behaviors to we-centric behaviors. And in order to do that, changes need to be made. And hence, in this particular tool, changes map to ways that we can do to get from I-centric to we-centric. C stands for co-creating, meaning we work together, collaborate, and co-create new ideas open to influence. And H stands for humanizing, meaning we work in empathy and we work in kindness and generosity with each other. A stands for aspiring. Humans are created with aspirations, which gives us new ideas and vision for the future, and our brain would make space for it, hence creating new routes, and where navigating is necessary to get to the new dreams and goals. Generating stands for generating conversations, especially during difficulties or conflicts, where we keep the conversation going with the previous perspectives so that we can get to the solution and get to expressing each other's ideas and thoughts and emotions so that we can further synchronizing each other, meaning we work at the same time and rate. When we synchronize, we work together toward the higher goals so that we can get to the foresight and get to a much better and stronger culture. collectively. And it's all about shifting from I to we. Back to you, Sayre.
Well, I was just going to share one of the best tools that I know of in having conversations is a book called Crucial Conversations. And a crucial conversation, also called a difficult conversation, are when opinions vary, stakes are high, and emotions run strong. And so often in business, we don't know how to handle these tools. We're not skilled in this. We don't know the right questions to ask. We don't know how to ask questions. We're fearful of looking stupid. We're fearful of what people might say if we ask a question. But when you think about the value of asking questions inside business, how many times have you left opportunities on the table? Or in a negotiation, you've left money on the table? Or what wasn't said turned out to create so many workarounds or huge errors. I remember my dad who was a mechanical engineer, would come home in the evening and kind of set the conversation tone for evening dinner. And he said, "Sayre, I made a $300,000 mistake today." And so you learn very early in life, when that's the topic of conversation, that you need to be able to ask critical questions and have difficult conversations. That's part of business. So there is a no more crucial conversation for 2021 than how organizations are going to bring their employees back to work. In the research we did, we can tell you that 81% of businesses have a tentative back into the office date set. However, 1/3 of employees said they would leave their employer if they have to go back in the office full time. And a little over half of employees said they had not yet been asked for any feedback on this process. Now, maybe change management isn't something that our leaders consider at times like this, but have made a decision without asking feedback up front, to not tell people what's driving that decision, how that decision is going to be rolled out, puts leaders and their employees on a very dangerous course of minimizing or eliminating any trust they built up in 2020, and makes them question, what your motives are. Do you really care enough about me as an employee? Do you really care enough about me as a human? Or am I here just for my productivity? So really a very critical conversation. So let's talk about how to do this reboarding plan. The Gallup organization has called this back to work movement the reboarding plan, and I really like it. We can provide you with a link to that article if you'd be interested, but it does suggest that you need a strategy that includes conversation between leaders and employees to develop what is the right reboarding plan. In addition, longtime employees need to understand that reboarding affects them as well. They might think that, oh, we're going back to normal, we don't need to know that. We worked here for 15 years. But the fact of the matter is, the world has changed so much. Business goals have changed dramatically from pre-COVID, that everyone's conversation needs to be recalibrated. So all employees need to know what the new conversation is going to be and be involved in creating that. Then it's time to establish new rituals. Once you've got the conversation going and you're starting to build trust again, and it's time to move things forward, it's very important to honor some of the old traditions you had from the previous culture. A quote, I'm sorry, I can't remember who this came from in the moment, but the quote is, "All change, loss. All loss must be mourned." And so mourning what you lost really helps you honor that and provide closure. And then moving forward is much easier and minimizes the grief and anger. And so once you provide that closure, then you can also blow up those old structures. Let's face it, there are so many broken work processes that we really should embrace the opportunity in 2021 to say, okay, we can let it go. It's not working. Didn't work 5 years ago, so let's stop it. And then creating new processes that not only support where the organization needs to be in achieving its 2021 goals, but new processes that also represent the interests of employees and leaders in this new world that we're living in.
Hey, Sayre.
Yeah.
I just feel like really on that closure part, a lot of companies don't really do well enough recognizing that's really what creating perhaps certain invisible conflicts in people when they're not clear about the closure, about what that's not working, and we're not doing that today.
I couldn't agree with you more. We don't do that very well as Americans, I don't think. Our culture is this young, strong cowboy kind of mentality still. We don't need to bring closure and grieve anything. We can pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep moving. But the point of all of that really is your identity and your purpose is really tied to some of those old cultures and rituals. And if you do not name what the loss is you are experiencing, oh my gosh, I in not coming into the office, I don't just miss the location, I miss my friendships. I miss the ability to have coffee. I miss the chance that it was so much easier to do my errands leaving from work than having to leave my home. It could be a number of things. And then to acknowledge all of those losses and then honor them by finding a way to bring some artifacts back in. When companies will change their brand, oftentimes you'll see employees and the employer actually hold on to a few artifacts from that previous brand because that reminds them of what they did back then when they started for the company. So by putting closure to all that, you make it okay to say, it's okay that you feel bad, and we have to move on. And this is what's going to be new, and here are the benefits. And that really helps people integrate those changes much more easily without the resistance. Vivian, I'm noticing your comment in the chat, and yes, that would be correct. Most organizations do not have a reporting plan. It is, I would suggest it is one of those situations where it's an all hands on deck. It impacts your physical plant. It impacts health and safety of employees, and organizations still have to figure out what those are going to be, what those processes are going to be. The amount of controversy we've already seen from employees really being adamant about understanding how safe that workplace is going to be. What questions can you ask me about whether I have been vaccinated? Do you want proof of my vaccination? Then those issues also segue into taking care of the mental and emotional health and well-being of employees as well. So that's just a small snippet of everything that needs to be considered in this reboarding plan. Plus, people are getting their companies up and running again. So I would suggest, unfortunately, that even if all of us who understood how to do this a little bit better were employed more than full time, there still will be a lot of companies who don't do it very well. Yeah. Any other comments, questions at this point? We have some tips at the very end here to share with you once again on how to continue that relationship rebuilding. So once again, we have to keep in mind that building new relationship is everyone's responsibility. It's not your supervisor. It is not the president of the company. It is absolutely everyone. It is the people who clean the building. They need to be brought into this as well. We have to norm the ability to talk to each other again. I don't know about you guys, but going into the grocery store or driving down the freeways these days, oh my stars, people are just elbows out and scared of everyone else and making up these stories in our head about how they looked or how they treated me. We just have such a long way to go. So everyone needs to norm out talking to each other again. We also want to make sure that we're building relationships that are attracting and create resilience. And what we mean by that is good conversations attract great energy. And so if your conversation just kind of shuts down the energy in the room, or you're not getting response from people, it's time to change that conversation into something that invites more people in and eventually spreads to building a culture that attracts people to your organization. And that will be incredibly important as the battle for talent continues to be at a fevered pitch for quite a while. And then also, people need to understand that in getting back in relationship between employers and employees, it is a relationship that needs to have some resilience, because we're not done changing yet. There's going to be a lot more that will change. Yet, when you're coming into the conversation where we're at right now, under stress, uncertainty, fear, doubt, etc., and more change continues to happen, we get scared, shut down, and think that, see, I'm right, this isn't going to work, rather than taking a perspective of having stronger resilience because you've built better relationships. The order changed on us. Why don't you go ahead and speak your mind?
So, psychological safety needs to be provided by leaders especially. And where you speak the mind and also explaining the why as leaders is that you don't keep people guessing. So speaking your mind is so very important, and being transparent and explaining your why. Why do you need to talk with so-and-so? Not just telling somebody, come see me in the office, tomorrow, and don't tell them what it is about, and they might be worried about, am I getting, the axe or what have you. Explain the why up front, you prime the trust, and so that you don't have to miss out the information that's so critical for folks involved. And then there you go, allowing each other to set new boundaries. So clearly being respectful and making sure that we are addressing the issues. And when somehow things are getting a little personal, folks need to recognize that and being able to talk about it. Especially we're talking about setting new boundaries is so important. Is where do you want to go? I'm ready to talk about this now. And I'd like to talk about this some other time. So there's this timing for a conversation to happen. So having the new boundaries and agreement on what we can talk about, when, where, and how to approach that will be really, really helpful for folks to be feeling the safety and being able to express themselves. And it's not a path to whine, right, when you provide psychological safety. So there are all these kind of boundaries that need to be sort of spelled out and test out, and it's a living document. It's not something cast in stone. Something's not working. You got to revisit it. And of course, when you speak the mind, you want to share your context. And for example, you might want your VP to come up with an idea on potential new product lines or new strategies that you want to have in place. So that's really important to help having the conversation more on point and on topic. And of course, the digital language, as we work remotely so much, we email, we text, and sometimes we use emoji, and not validating what has been really taken in. So without the listeners being able to express themselves and revalidate what they have heard, this is back to this, tied to this making time for conversations, right? Sometimes we jump right into the conclusion and not going with the validation. So watch out for the digital language when we do exchange information. Validation is really the first step, is just making sure that what's put out there was received properly. For example, all caps in the text, perhaps some people would think it's an enthusiasm, but others might feel like they're being shouted at and somehow getting triggered without really knowing. So those are the things are really got to be watchful.
Pearl, I just have to share, I have told more than one person, what does this emoji of this dancing, elephant mean to me? I don't understand. How does this connect to what we're talking about? So anyway.
And we have so many generations now working right in the workforce. You have millennials and Gen Zs. They are digital native because that's what they were so used to. And they think that the message had been sent, that people just understood what they mean. So without really clarifying what that really meaning, set yourself up into sort of different talking across, right? Because the focus are different.
Excellent. Creating new expectations from working from home really refers to norming out this process. We had certain behaviors we used last year because it was an episode and it was an emergency of all of a sudden we're locked down. But what type of expectations? It's important to spell that out for people so there's no misunderstandings. Do you have expectations that there will be a higher level of productivity when you are working at home? Certain periods of time you have to be online and available. Or is there any flexibility in that for when you have to feed your children lunch or take someone to school, etc.? And then what are the expectations in terms of your ability to connect when you're in the office versus your ability to connect when you are at home? In the past, prior to COVID, I've always asked to work from home when I have really big projects I really need to have peace and quiet and just sink my teeth into. I try not to do that work in an office setting because my concentration is so much better at home. So maybe that's an expectation that can stay in place for people. But to assume that everyone should know what to do because of what we did last year is setting us up for miscommunications, broken trust, etc. And then our next suggestion is to be kind, extend trust, and expect the relationship to evolve. So this being kind gets back to having conversations, not just communications. Understand that everyone has a story behind however they show up at work on any given day, whether they're working from home or in the office. So it's understanding that deeper story, not just brushing past that and getting your own needs met. When you extend trust, you trust that someone who isn't able to show up well, that has to do with them, not you. Extend them trust that they have your best interest at heart and aren't out to get you in any way. And then when you create these relationships, these new relationships between employers and employees, you have to have the expectations that these are going to evolve as the business evolves, as we evolve from all of these changes. Our final suggestion is that conversations happen when you meet in the middle. And, the middle is a very precious place these days because our world seems to be polarized on just about any topic you can think of. So we understand it takes a little bit of extra effort and it takes a little bit of extra time, but that's where the answers and the solutions lie. And when we get so busy so that we say that I don't have time to communicate, I'm too busy, I'll communicate after I get this done. It's just very difficult to find those solutions when you can't have that time and space in the middle to find the answers. So our next meeting, June 18th, designing the culture building process. Dave Jameson is someone I have met in my travels. He is both a scholar and a business consultant. Rare to find someone as articulate as Dave is, who's working in both of those areas at the same time. He's also worked internationally quite a bit as well. And he's going to take us through when you have to rebuild a culture. Where do you start right now when the train has left the station and is going down the tracks very fast in a very broken condition? How do you say, okay, time out, how do we rebuild? And so Pearl and I are going to be doing an interview with Dave, and he will pretty much carry us through the conversation on his own. I've had several conversations with Dave already, and he's just an amazing communicator about all things related to organizational development. If you want to go online and look up his credentials, feel free to do so. Or if you want some details from me, I'd be happy to share that with you. But this conversation will be the richest of all that we have done because of what Dave can bring to the party. So we hope that you will join us.
Well, Sayre, it's been wonderful conversations as usual.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
And if you have any more questions, feel free to put in the chat. We still have a couple more minutes. If not, then we can wrap up and see you on our next session in 2 weeks.
See you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.